Savitri's story begins in the hush before dawn, when the world still breathes with the memory of ancient gods and the soft sigh of destiny unfolding. In the stillness of old India, where forests rose like emerald cathedrals and rivers murmured with the voices of forgotten sages, there lived a kingdom wrapped in both blessing and shadow. Its air was rich with incense, sandalwood, and the whisper of leaves brushed by warm, expectant winds. It was a land where the mortal and the divine leaned close, so close that a single heartbeat could echo in the chambers of heaven, and a single choice could bend the slow turning of fate. It is in this world, half real and half dream, that the myth of Savitri and Satyavan begins. One of love powerful enough to press its lips against the face of death itself. From the first breath of this tale, the atmosphere trembles with a promise that love, fragile as a flame cupped between trembling hands, might dare to confront the chill of destiny. Before Savitri's name was whispered in devotion, before Satyavan's warmth became the axis of her world, there was an ancient prophecy, a shadow cast long before either of them opened their eyes to the morning sun. In this land, every tree carried a memory, every mountain held an oath, and every god still walked the edges of mortal life. Fate was not a distant concept, but a presence that leaned in close, listening, watching, waiting. And yet, even in a world governed by celestial law, there remained one force that could shift the balance. A force born not of divine decree, but of human devotion. The forests where their destinies would one day entwine stood in quiet anticipation. Tall sal trees swayed gently, their leaves shimmering like scales of jade in the soft light. Banyan roots twisted like ancient serpents, anchoring memories deep into the soil. Birds with jeweled feathers scattered songs through the air, melodies that drifted like prayers. Somewhere far within this living maze of green, a path remained hidden, one that would lead Savitri toward the boy whose life was already burning like a short, bright candle. But for now, the forest simply breathed, holding its secrets lightly, as though waiting for the right hand to brush them awake. The kingdom itself shimmered with a sense of pending change. Prophets, wise men, and wandering mendicants felt the tremor long before the story began. They spoke of a soul born under a radiant star, a girl destined to love with a devotion fierce enough to challenge the very order of the cosmos. They spoke also of another soul, gentle and luminous, whose life had been measured in painfully limited breaths. Their paths would cross, they said, like two comets destined to collide, brief, bright, and irreversibly transformative. Yet no one knew how the heavens would tilt when that collision came. No one knew whether love or fate would triumph in the final reckoning. In this tale, sensuality does not slither in openly. It swells quietly, like warm undercurrents beneath cool river waters. It is the softness of fingertips grazing a beloved's wrist. The way a voice trembles when saying a name, the subtle ache of wanting to linger in a presence that feels both safe and electrifying. Even before the lovers meet, the sensuality exists in the landscape itself, lush, breathing, ripe with life. Flowers bloom with shocking color, the air hums with unseen energy, and every breeze seems to carry a promise of intimacy. This is a world where emotion is corporeal, where longing is as tangible as the warmth of sunlight on bare skin. It is here, in this fertile soil, that their love will take root, destined to flourish even against the hard, cold stone of mortality. The myth's core tension begins to stretch its roots long before the lovers themselves are aware of it. It is the tension between the tenderness of human desire and the unyielding decree of cosmic fate, between the sweetness of life and the inevitability of loss, between what the heart dares to claim and what destiny tries to deny. This tension hangs in the air like a held breath, vibrating with possibility and sorrow. Even the gods sense it, watching from realms unseen, with a mixture of curiosity and solemnity, for they know that love, once awakened, can become a force even death must acknowledge. And so the tone of this story rises, gentle yet foreboding, like a temple bell ringing in the distance, clear, haunting, impossible to ignore. For this is not merely a tale of affection or devotion. It is a tale of a love so deep and sensual that it becomes its own form of power. A love that coils through the soul, binding two beings in a union that neither heaven nor earth can easily unravel. A love that will soon stand face to face with the darkest, coldest truth of life, its impermanence. Savitri herself, though not yet introduced in fullness, is felt like a warm breeze entering the room before the figure steps through the doorway. Her presence shifts the air, adds color to the horizon. Somewhere, she walks through the gardens of her father's palace, her bare feet brushing the cool marble, unaware that destiny watches her with a hunger sharpened by inevitability. She is not yet in love, but something calls to her, perhaps a whisper from the forest, perhaps a tug from the invisible threads that bind all souls fated to meet. The world prepares itself for her choice, for once she encounters Satyavan, her heart will ignite with a passion that refuses to be dimmed by fear. Satyavan, too, moves through his world with quiet grace. His laughter filters through the trees. His hands are gentle with the land he tends. Yet a shadow clings to him, unseen but never absent. Those who know the prophecy look at him with both affection and sorrow, as though watching a sunset beautiful enough to break the heart because it will not last. His fate is sealed, his time already numbered, but love has not yet touched him, has not yet offered him the possibility of something brighter than destiny itself. He waits, though he does not know he is waiting. Their worlds, separate for now, drift closer with every passing moment. The forest senses it, the rivers sense it, even the wind, playful and curious, swirls through the branches as though eager to witness the meeting
that will change everything. And beneath all of this, beneath the singing birds, the shimmering leaves, the whispered prophecies, there is something deeper stirring, a sensual hum, a tremor of emotion, a quiet promise that when Savitri and Satyavan's eyes finally meet, the world will tilt slightly, softly, irrevocably. This introduction is but the first exhale of a story woven from longing and courage, tenderness and inevitability. It invites the listener to step closer, to lean in and feel the heartbeat beneath the tale. The air is thick with destiny. The edges of the world shimmer with possibility. Love is approaching, warm and luminous, while fate waits in the shadows with patient, icy hands. And somewhere between these two forces, between passion and prophecy, Savitri and Satyavan will begin the journey that shapes the legend.
Savitri's presence entered the world the way dawn enters a quiet room, softly at first, then with a glow that slowly fills every corner. Before she ever met Satyavan, she carried within her a depth of feeling so profound that even the gods paused to listen when her heart stirred. Devotion for her was not a choice, but a natural exhale, an intrinsic quality woven into her being like gold threads in silk. She walked through her father's palace with a grace that seemed effortless, yet nothing about her was passive. She absorbed the world with keen, intuitive eyes, catching subtleties others overlooked. When she spoke, even in gentle tones, the words carried warmth that lingered long after they faded. Her beauty did not shout, it whispered. It shimmered in the tilt of her head, the softness of her footsteps, the delicate strength of a mind that saw beyond surfaces. Many admired her, yet she remained untouched, not out of aloofness, but because she waited for a bond she would recognize by its resonance, the way a string knows the note meant to make it vibrate. Quiet sensuality followed her like a second shadow. It lived in her gaze, in the way she let her eyes settle on someone long enough for them to feel genuinely seen. It lived in the gentle curve of her smile, a smile not born from flirtation, but from a soul fully alive to the world's beauty. Savitri moved as though the earth beneath her feet softened itself to accommodate her steps. And when her fingers brushed a flower petal or a page of sacred text, she did so with a tenderness that suggested she was in conversation with the object, listening as much as touching. Even the breeze seemed drawn to her, weaving through her hair with affectionate familiarity, as if recognizing her as a child of nature, a woman who would one day challenge destiny with nothing but the force of her love. But for all her serenity, there was a furnace within her, a fierce certainty that, when awakened, would burn with unyielding devotion. This intensity did not show itself openly. It glowed beneath her calm exterior like embers beneath ash. Others knew she was formidable, yet they did not understand how profoundly her heart could attach when it finally chose. Savitri herself did not yet know, but the world around her sensed it. This woman, gentle as a moonlit lake,
carried enough emotional power to shake even the cold, fixed laws of the gods. Elsewhere, Satyavan lived beneath the canopy of the forest that had shaped him. The trees were his teachers, the wind his companion, the earth his home. In contrast to Savitri's palace-born elegance, Satyavan belonged to the wilderness with an ease that felt both primal and holy. His hands bore the calluses of labor, yet they moved with remarkable gentleness when tending to wounded animals or weaving baskets from reeds. His strength was not solely physical. It emanated from a spirit anchored deeply in truth and compassion. Those who met him spoke of the warmth he radiated, a warmth that did not ask for attention but offered comfort effortlessly. His laughter was soft but genuine, like sunlight spilling between leaves. His eyes held a light that seemed to come from some place ancient, a quiet wisdom that made even grief-stricken souls breathe easier.
Yet, within this radiant young man lay a fragility invisible to most. The prophecy of his short life hovered over him like a translucent veil, faint but undeniable. His parents saw it every time they looked at him for too long. The ache within them sharpened whenever he smiled. The forest, too, sensed it in the gentle way it responded to his presence, as though cherishing him a little extra, knowing its time with him was limited. Satyavan himself did not live in fear of his destined end. He accepted fate the way he accepted the changing seasons, without resistance, with a quiet understanding that all things return eventually to the silence from which they came. If sadness ever brushed him, he hid it behind a life of purposeful intention, savoring every moment with a sincerity that made others love him instinctively. He did not know it yet, but he carried a space within him, an absence shaped like a future love. And when Savitri entered that space, it would fit her perfectly, as though destiny itself had carved it for her. Their first meeting felt less like an encounter and more like a memory remembering itself. Savitri had wandered deep into the forest during her search for the one to whom her heart would belong. She walked with steady steps, guided by a feeling she could not name, a pull that felt like the earth gently tugging at her ankles. The forest seemed to brighten as she moved through it. Branches parted, light softened, the air thickened with anticipation. Then, as she reached a clearing touched by golden sunlight, she saw him. Satyavan stood beside a fallen tree, an axe resting near his feet. His hair caught the sunlight and shimmered like dark bronze. His skin glowed with the warmth of a life spent outdoors. But it was his presence, calm, grounded, bright, that struck her, sending a ripple through her very breath. When he looked up, their eyes met with a quiet click of inevitability, as though two pieces of the puzzle had finally found each other after lifetimes of searching.
Satyavan felt the moment just as sharply. Savitri appeared to him not like a stranger, but like someone he had always expected to meet. Her presence seemed to shift the air, lending it a softness that made his heartbeat deepen. He noticed the serenity in her posture, the intelligence in her gaze, the gentleness threaded into every movement. But he also sensed something more, a warmth that tugged at him, drawing him toward her with the subtle gravity of a star pulling a wandering planet into orbit. Their energies met like morning light touching shadow, soft, warm, natural. Savitri, radiant with intuitive certainty, recognized Satyavan instantly as the one her heart had been shaping itself around long before she knew his name. And Satyavan, whose life had been marked by a quiet acceptance of his limited time, suddenly felt the future open like a flower. She brought with her the promise of depth, of shared breath, of moments that would make even a brief life feel beautifully full. He brought to her a warmth she could anchor herself to, a purity that made her devotion feel not only right, but inevitable. Their conversation that day flowed like water over smooth stone, effortless and soothing. Savitri spoke with a softness that wrapped itself around his soul. He listened with an attentiveness that made her feel illuminated from within. They walked beneath the trees, pausing to admire small wildflowers or listen to distant birdsong. Every glance carried a gentle spark. Every brush of fingertips sent a shiver of awareness through them both. Before conflict ever entered their story, they already meant the world to each other. Savitri saw in Satyavan not just a man, but a living embodiment of sincerity and harmony. His kindness stirred her deepest devotion. His wisdom awakened her quiet sensuality. He made her feel understood in a way she had not realized she longed for. And Satyavan, in turn, felt his life transformed by her presence. Savitri's gaze made him feel timeless, as though his destiny did not confine him but widened in her warmth. She filled him with longing, soft, reverent longing, and with a new, fragile hope. Their bond, irresistible from the moment it formed, was already shaping itself into something that neither fate nor fear could easily break.
From the moment Savitri chose Satyavan, the world around them shifted, as if holding its breath. Their love grew with the tender inevitability of vines climbing toward sunlight. But even in the sweetness of those early days, a shadow lingered beneath the surface of every moment. It came not from doubt between them, nor from any flaw in their devotion, but from an ancient law whispered by sages long before their hearts ever met. The prophecy of Satyavan's impending death, fixed, unalterable, carved into the cosmos like script upon stone, loomed over them with chilling certainty. It was a truth that seemed too cruel to belong to a world filled with sunlight and birdsong, and yet it was real. Fate, impartial and unmoving, had already counted Satyavan's days, and that number was painfully few. When Savitri first learned of this prophecy from the sages in the forest, the words struck her like a sudden drop in temperature. She felt something inside her chest constrict, as though an unseen hand had closed around her heart. Yet in the same breath, another force surged within her, hot, fierce, unwavering, love. Not the gentle, drifting affection of newly met souls, but a blazing devotion sharp enough to challenge the heavens. That fire rose in her, clear and incandescent. She did not waver. She did not consider turning away. Savitri's love was not a fragile bloom. It was a flame that refused to flicker in the face of destiny. She returned to Satyavan with the prophecy held within her like a secret blade, sharp, hidden, burning. She watched him with new eyes, tender and desperate, as though memorizing every detail.
the way his smile bloomed slowly, like sunlight easing through leaves, the warmth of his hand as it enveloped hers, the softness in his voice when he spoke her name. Every moment became precious, edged with both sweetness and sorrow. She felt the ache of wanting to hold time still, to keep the seconds from slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. And with every heartbeat, her desire grew, not simply desire for him, but desire to save him, to protect him, to defy the law of death itself. Satyavan sensed the shift within her before she spoke of it. Her touch lingered longer, her gaze softened with a depth that felt both comforting and troubling. Sometimes, as they walked through the forest together, her fingers would tighten around his as though anchoring herself to a world that threatened to tilt beneath her. He would turn toward her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, and she would inhale sharply, as though the simple touch stirred both longing and fear. "Savitri," he would murmur, his thumb grazing her cheek, and she would smile gently, the expression laced with aching tenderness, yet say nothing of the prophecy. Not yet. She wanted to protect him even from the knowledge of his fate.
Desire bloomed between them, not as a single moment, but as a slow crescendo. It rose in the quiet intimacy of their shared breaths as they sat beneath trees whose branches arched like lovers' arms overhead. It deepened in the hush of twilight when the forest dimmed and fireflies glowed between them like sparks drawn from their hearts. It swelled in the soft, deliberate brush of her hand along his forearm, in the way he leaned into her touch instinctively, as though drawn by gravity itself. Their closeness was sensual, not for what they did, but for everything they allowed themselves to feel. Savitri felt his warmth seep into her. He felt her devotion settle into him like a blessing. But between every tender moment, the prophecy curled like smoke, reminding Savitri that time was running toward a precipice she could not see. That knowledge made her desire sharpen, deepening every whisper, every glance, every brush of fingertips across skin. She would sit beside him on fallen logs, their legs touching lightly, the warmth of his body flowing into hers. He would take her hand, tracing circles along her palm with a gentleness that made her chest tighten. She longed to hold him closer, to press her forehead against his neck and breathe him in as though she could draw his life into her own. She longed to shield him with her body, her voice, her will. Yet she also feared clinging too tightly, afraid the gods might sense her desperation and harden their hearts further. Their nights were filled with quiet conversations that drifted into shared silence, the kind of silence where emotion becomes a presence of its own. Sometimes Satyavan would tilt her chin upward, his eyes searching hers for an unspoken truth. "There is something you're carrying," he whispered once, brushing his lips near her temple, close enough for her to feel their warmth without contact. The nearness sent a shiver down her spine. "Tell me," he breathed. "Your heart trembles when you think I'm not looking." But Savitri could not then. Her voice faltered every time she tried. She wanted to protect him from fear, from sorrow, from the weight of a destiny that felt too heavy for any mortal heart to bear. Instead, she pressed her forehead gently to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her skin. He wrapped his arms around her, comforting her without understanding the source of her trembling. His embrace was warm, grounding, the kind of touch that gently unravels the tension within another person. The closeness filled her with both serenity and despair. She clung to him, fingers curling around the fabric of his tunic, as though anchoring herself to the one person she could not bear to lose.
The conflict grew sharper as her love deepened. She often found herself watching him from across the clearing when he worked, her gaze tracing the strong lines of his arms, the ease with which he moved. He seemed timeless in those moments, untouched by the shadow she knew hovered over him. But then his laughter would fade, or he would pause to catch his breath, and a wave of fear would wash over her so intense it nearly stole her voice. Every small exhaustion, every fleeting silence, every sigh became a reminder of the prophecy she wished she could unhear. Her heart tugged painfully, torn between adoration and dread. Yet in that very fear, desire rooted itself deeper. She wanted to be his refuge, his comfort, his strength. She wanted to hold him so close that even death would hesitate to approach. She wanted to love him with such devotion that fate itself would tremble. In the quiet of dawn, she would touch his cheek softly while he slept, her fingertips memorizing the warmth of his skin. When he stirred, she would pull her hand away quickly, but he often caught her fingers, pressing them lightly to his lips with a sleepy smile. It was those small, tender gestures that undid her. The conflict was no longer only between love and destiny, it was within her, between fear and courage, vulnerability and fierce determination. She began to burn with a secret vow, a vow that the gods themselves would one day hear. Satyavan would not be lost. She would not allow the prophecy to steal him from her arms. Love had chosen her, and she would answer it with everything she had. Her desire, soft, glimmering, powerful, became a force the world itself could feel. Even the forest seemed to lean in closer, the wind brushing the two of them gently as though sensing the coming storm. When Savitri finally whispered her vow into the night, her voice trembled with both fear and fire. "I will not let you go, not to destiny, not to death. You are mine, and I am yours, and no power in heaven or earth will break that." It was a promise born of longing, fear, courage, and vulnerability, all weaving together into the conflict that would define their fate. And as she spoke those words, somewhere in the unseen realms, the gods stirred, sensing the beginning of a battle not of swords, but of hearts. A battle where love dared to challenge death itself. Satyavan's final day began with a strange stillness, a hush so delicate that even the forest seemed to sense the approaching shift between worlds. The early light filtered through the trees in long golden strands, laying themselves gently across the earth like offerings. Savitri felt the change before she opened her eyes. Something in the air, too quiet, too heavy, too expectant, pressed against her skin like a warning. She lay beside Satyavan, watching him as he slept, his breath warm against her collarbone. She traced her fingers along the line of his jaw, committing every detail to memory with aching tenderness. The prophecy hummed in her blood, but she refused to let fear take the morning from her. When Satyavan woke, he smiled with the unguarded warmth that always made her heart flutter. He touched her cheek, brushing his thumb across her skin, and she leaned into him, letting the contact ground her. "You look at me as though today is precious," he murmured softly. She swallowed, her heart tightening. "Every day with you is precious," she whispered. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, light, lingering, and she closed her eyes, savoring the sensation as though imprinting it onto her soul. They walked into the forest together, hand in hand, the trees arching above them like a living cathedral. The sunlight shimmered through the leaves, turning the world into a mosaic of warmth and shadow. Satyavan laughed as he pointed out the new buds sprouting along the branches, and Savitri watched him with a mixture of love and dread. He did not notice the faint tremor in her breath, nor the way her fingers clung a little tighter to his. When Satyavan lifted his axe and began to work, Savitri stood nearby, watching each swing, each ripple of strength through his arms. She loved him in every movement, every breath. But suddenly, in the middle of lifting the axe, Satyavan paused. His body swayed. The axe slipped from his fingers. Savitri's heart seized. "Satyavan!" she called softly. He turned toward her, his eyes unfocused, like someone reaching through mist. "Savitri," he whispered, and the tremor in his voice tore through her. He stepped toward her, but his legs buckled. In an instant she was there, catching him as he collapsed into her arms. Her world shattered. She lowered him gently to the ground, cradling his head in her lap. His breathing faltered, uneven, fragile. She cupped his face with trembling hands. "Stay with me," she begged, her voice breaking on every word. "Please, my love, stay." He tried to speak, but his lips only formed her name. She pressed her forehead to his, her breath shaking. "I'm here. I won't let you go." But fate had come to claim its due. The air around them shifted. A cold wind brushed through the clearing, brushing against Savitri's skin like an unwelcome hand. The sunlight dimmed, and then from the shadows between the trees, a tall figure emerged, dark, solemn, terrifying in his stillness.
Yama, the god of death. His presence swallowed the warmth from the air. His form shimmered with authority older than time, his eyes deep with inevitability. He looked at Savitri, then at Satyavan's fading body, and extended his hand toward the invisible thread of the young man's soul. "His time has come," Yama said, his voice neither cruel nor kind, but absolute. Savitri's breath stopped. "No," she whispered, her arms tightening around Satyavan. "No, please, not him." Yama stepped forward. The very ground seemed to bow beneath his weight. "The law cannot be broken. His destiny was decided long before you loved him." Those words struck her like a blade. But instead of collapsing, something fierce ignited within her. She leaned over Satyavan, pressing her cheek to his, her lips brushing the corner of his mouth in a trembling kiss. "I love you," she breathed, "and I will not let you walk into the dark alone."
Yama reached down and pulled the glowing thread of Satyavan's soul from his body. Satyavan's chest stilled. The warmth faded. Savitri felt the world split open inside her. She looked up at Yama, her eyes burning with grief and devotion. "If you take him," she said softly, "then you must take me too." Yama paused. Savitri rose, leaving Satyavan's body gently upon the earth. She followed Yama as he walked away, her steps unwavering. The forest seemed to fade around them as they crossed into a realm of dim twilight. The air grew colder, heavier, yet Savitri did not falter. Her devotion held her upright. Yama turned his gaze toward her. "Mortal girl, go back. You cannot follow me." She stepped closer, her voice steady, though her heart bled. "Where he walks, I walk. Where you take him, you take me. My love is not a thing left behind." Her words carried a vibration, a raw intimacy that stirred even the god of death. This was no ordinary devotion. This was the kind of love that glowed like fire beneath the skin, quiet, steady, sensual in its closeness. She was not pleading with her body, she was pleading with her soul. A truth offered nakedly, without pride, without fear. Yama felt it. He slowed.
Savitri stepped closer until she stood only a few breaths away from him. She placed her hand over her heart. "Take everything from me," she murmured. "My comfort, my safety, my place in the world, but do not take him alone. My devotion does not end where your shadow begins." Her voice trembled, and in that trembling lived all her love, warm, vulnerable, yearning. Yama felt the sincerity of it like a pulse against his ancient heart. He turned to her fully. "You would follow him into darkness?" She looked up into the god's fathomless gaze, her own eyes shimmering with both tears and courage, without hesitation. Yama's presence shifted. A subtle ripple passed through the realm, as though her devotion sent light trembling across the darkness. "You are brave," Yama said quietly. "I am in love," Savitri whispered. Her words lingered between them with an intimacy so pure it softened the very air. It was a spiritual seduction, not a manipulation, but a revelation. She showed him her heart, without shields, without armor. She stood before the god of death, naked of pretense, clothed only in devotion. Yama looked at her for a long moment, then slowly he spoke. "You may return to the world of the living. Ask for a boon, anything but his life." Savitri stepped closer still. "Then I ask for his eyes to see our children." Yama stiffened. She had not challenged the law, but she had curved it gently, boldly, intimately. Her sincerity pressed against him like warmth in winter. Another boon, and that his hands may guide them as they grow. Yama's eyes flickered. Another boon, and that his heart may remain beside mine to watch them become who they will be. The thread trembled in his grip. Finally, she whispered, soft, trembling, irresistible, "Return him to me, for our future already lives within us." Yama closed his eyes. Her love had undone him. He extended the soul thread toward her. Satyavan is yours. And in that moment, the darkness receded, yielding to the light of her devotion, a love so powerful it reshaped the boundary between life and death.
Savitri felt the air shift around her, as if the entire universe were holding its breath after the storm of emotion she had just endured. Yama had stopped. The thread of fate, once tense and merciless, now seemed to vibrate with a new note, a note that did not belong to death but to love. For a moment that stretched beyond time itself, the goddess of silent love, she who had defended life with an open, unguarded heart, stood still, watching the dark god looming before her. Yama, in his solemn eternity, had been moved, though he would not admit it easily. The weight of his countless decisions, each older than creation itself, suddenly felt small compared to the light radiating from Savitri. She had not shouted, demanded, or bribed fate. She had offered something deeper, the absolute surrender of herself, the purity of a love that asked for nothing in return, not out of selfish desire, but because losing Satyavan would mean losing the very meaning of the world. The god knew what he had witnessed was no ordinary act. Savitri had bargained with courage, yes, but she had also seduced the cosmos with a fierce tenderness, a devotion so intimate that even death had to listen. And then, in that space, suspended between the inevitable and the impossible, Yama spoke with a voice that seemed carved from the stone of the earliest ages. "Savitri," he said, "your love has not sought to bend the law for whim, nor challenge the order out of pride. Your prayer has sprung from a heart so pure that even my judgment must acknowledge it." Savitri did not respond, not because she had no words, but because she feared she would shatter if she spoke. Hope was a fragile creature, and any sudden motion might scare it away. Yama raised his hand, and for a moment the shadow of death dissolved like smoke in the dawn light. In that gesture, there was something that was neither threat nor distance. It was concession, respect, almost affection. Yama continued, "Savitri, your love has not sought to bend the law for whim, nor challenge the order out of pride. Your prayer has sprung from a heart so pure that even my judgment must acknowledge it." Savitri realized what happened and felt her knees buckle. The ground beneath her seemed to melt into a warm tide, and yet she did not fall. She held her stance as if a new axis had been placed at her center. Yama's words transformed into a whisper that spread through the trees, the ancient roots, the sky itself, waiting for the outcome of this story. "Satyavan shall live," the god declared. And in that moment, reality shifted. Behind her, the body of the man she loved breathed,
one fragile, trembling inhalation, like the first light crossing a dark horizon, then another, deeper. Savitri turned slowly, afraid that moving too fast might make the vision vanish. But it did not vanish. It was not an illusion. Satyavan still lay on the ground, but his chest rose and fell. His lips held color again. His skin, once rigid as marble, had become warm, alive, human. Savitri fell to his side, letting her trembling hands trace his face, his neck, the line of his jaw. It was him, her beloved, her destiny, her companion. Satyavan opened his eyes with the softness of one returning from a deep, boundless sleep, and upon seeing her, he smiled with a tenderness that seemed to melt the lingering shadows in the air. "Savitri," he murmured, as if speaking her name itself was a rebirth. She did not cry. Her tears had been shed in the mourning that had transformed into triumph. Instead, she gazed at him with a luminous serenity, as if her soul had been polished by fire and now shone from within. She leaned toward him, resting her forehead against his, breathing in his breath, sharing the miracle they had forged together, not with magic or power, but with bare, unmasked love. The forest around them, once silent witness, seemed to vibrate with an almost human murmur. The trees whispered, the leaves trembled, the wind danced in a soft hum. It was as if nature itself celebrated the return of the young prince, and more so, the strength of the woman who had faced death and prevailed. Satyavan tried to rise, but Savitri held him with a mixture of firmness and care, as if he might break, even though she knew he was whole now. He looked at her with a faint frown of confusion. "What happened?" he asked. Savitri exhaled slowly, letting her voice emerge with the gentleness of dawn. "Your fate was fulfilled and then rewritten." Satyavan did not fully understand, but he understood enough. His fingers found hers, intertwining, seeking, grounding themselves in the truth of her presence. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, as if death had taught him to cherish every curve of her face, every shadow of her lashes, every heartbeat they shared. And in his gaze was a love born only when one returns from nothingness.
Savitri helped him to his feet, and together they walked the path back home. But nothing was the same. The road seemed wider, brighter, the air lighter. Their steps echoed like the pulse of rebirth. Satyavan paused, gently tugging her hand to make her turn toward him. "You brought me back," he said, incredulous, reverent, in love. "I followed you," Savitri corrected. "Wherever you went, I went, and if there was no path, I would make one with my hands." Satyavan embraced her then, a long, deep, silent embrace, one that contained death, life, loss, rebirth, and desire. The kind of embrace that can only exist between two souls who have faced the abyss together. When they reached the kingdom of Jumatsana, Satyavan's father, the world seemed to bow in welcome. The king, who had lived in the shadow of his own tragedy,
felt something inside him break upon seeing his son. Something old, dry, resigned to despair. But seeing Satyavan alive, walking, breathing, smiling, his soul illuminated like a temple at sunrise. Savitri recounted, humbly, what she had faced, not to boast, but to honor the truth. And all listened, hearts suspended, because the story seemed impossible, yet there it was before them, living, pulsating, embodied in the resurrected prince. That night the kingdom celebrated not only the heir's return, but the triumph of love over fate. Torches burned like earthly stars, voices rose grateful, drums thundered like the world's renewed heartbeat. But for Satyavan and Savitri, the true celebration was in the quiet of a hidden corner where they could hold hands and look back on the path they had traversed. Savitri rested her head on Satyavan's chest, listening to the heart she had restored. In that rhythm, she found her reward. It was not glory, nor divine recognition. It was this: to be with him, to feel him breathe, to know their love had woven a victory no myth could ever forget. Satyavan kissed her forehead with a near sacred slowness. "I don't know how to repay you," he whispered. "You don't have to repay me," she replied. "You already have, simply by existing." And so, without ceremony, without grand proclamations, the story reached its brightest conclusion. Two souls who had crossed the boundary of death now returned to the world to live, love, and build a destiny no longer bound. Savitri had not only saved Satyavan, she had rewritten what it meant to love.
There are stories that linger long after their final breath, stories that do not end when the last scene fades, because their true life resides not in events, but in the quiet truths they leave behind. The tale of Savitri and Satyavan is one of those rare myths, one that refuses to crumble under the weight of time, because its core is made not of miracles or divine interventions, but of something far more enduring: the invincible tenderness of love. When we look back on the path Savitri walked, we see not only the bravery of a woman defying the god of death, but the profound declaration that love is not weakened by mortality. It is sharpened by it. It is carved into shape by the very fragility it seeks to protect. Love, in this myth, becomes a force so intimate, so fiercely devoted, that even cosmic law bends just enough to let it breathe. And as we revisit this journey, we begin to realize that this myth is not merely a celebration of devotion. It is an invitation to understand the essence of connection itself. In Savitri's story, sensuality does not arise from desire's flame, but from the merging of two souls who recognize each other beyond the surface of touch, beyond form, beyond the limitations of the body. It is the sensuality of presence, of feeling another spirit intertwined with your own. It is the kind of intimacy that can follow someone into the realm where pulse fails and breath falls silent. Savitri walked there not because she sought to break the rules of existence, but because her love was so deeply fused with Satyavan's that separation was not a possibility her heart could allow.
As we reflect on her unwavering steps beside Yama, we see a truth that resonates across cultures, across eras, across every heart that has ever feared losing what it cherishes. Love, when rooted in sincerity, refuses to be passive. It refuses to bow. It refuses to surrender to the cold mechanics of fate. What Savitri offered the world was not the idea that death can always be conquered. Instead, she showed that even in the face of endings, love gives meaning, shape, and brilliance to every breath we take. She revealed that love's greatest strength is not its ability to prevent loss, but its ability to illuminate the path through it. And yet, in her story, something extraordinary happened. Her devotion did more than bring comfort to a doomed journey. It rewrote the destination itself.
This is the power that myths grant us, a glimpse into what the heart longs to believe is possible. But if we look closely, we see that Savitri's triumph was not an act of divine favoritism. It was the result of her emotional courage, her willingness to bare her soul before an unyielding force, her refusal to let fear poison the purity of her love. It is easy in stories to talk about courage, harder to embody it, harder still to recognize it in its truest form. Quiet, persistent, trembling, but unwavering. Savitri's courage was not loud. It was not adorned with armor or sharpened with blades. It was the courage of someone who loves deeply enough to be vulnerable. Someone who chooses connection even when the world itself threatens to sever it. And because she embraced that vulnerability fully, it became her strength. When she stood before Yama, she did not tempt him with beauty or plead for mercy. She stood in her truth, in the nakedness of a heart that refuses to betray what it holds sacred. There is a sensuality in that kind of honesty, a warmth that no cold decree can starve, a glow that persists through darkness. This is the kind of sensuality that permeates the myth. Quiet, soulful, radiant. It is the warmth of two breaths synchronizing under the canopy of a forest. It is the way Savitri sensed the fragility of Satyavan's fate and still held him with unwavering softness. It is the way his presence lived in her pulse long after his heartbeat had ceased. Their connection was not limited by the shape of their bodies. It existed in the shared space between their spirits. That is why it survived the crossing into death's domain. That is why it returned with them into the realm of life. And that is why the story continues to resonate century after century like a whispered truth carried from one generation to the next. The myth does not promise that love conquers all, but it shows that love transforms everything it touches. It changes the texture of grief. It gives courage to the fearful. It binds what seems broken. It gives meaning to moments that might otherwise drift away unnoticed. And more than anything,
It reveals the universal hunger at the heart of every human being, the desire to protect what we love, even when the world insists that protection is impossible.
To watch Savitri walk into the shadowed valley beside Yama is to witness the rawest form of devotion. To watch her walk out again is to witness the triumph not of power, but of sincerity. Her story endures because it reflects our deepest yearning, that the bonds we forge in tenderness can outlast the boundaries that frighten us. It offers the consolation that even if we cannot always alter fate, the love we give shapes the path we walk toward it. And in the myth's quietest moments, there is a lesson that glimmers like a hidden ember. Sensuality is not found in the fire of bodies alone, but in the resonance between souls, in the way two beings can feel each other's presence like a second heartbeat, in the way love can be expressed through silence, through stillness, through the simple act of staying. That is what Savitri did. She stayed, not out of obligation, not out of stubbornness, but out of a devotion so profound that even divine forces paused to witness it. And in her staying, she revealed a truth worth holding close, that to love someone is to create a space where their essence can live, even when the world threatens to remove them. The story of Savitri and Satyavan leaves us with a whisper, not a proclamation. A whisper that says, love is not fragile. It is not fleeting. It is the quiet flame that keeps us warm when fate grows cold. And when we carry this story within us, we are reminded that even in the darkest moments, love can guide us, hold us, reshape us. We are reminded that the heart has a language older than the cosmos itself, and that sometimes, if we listen closely, it can teach us how to transcend the impossible.